right, well, I think we can go ahead and get started. Folks won't miss too much if they join in another minute or two. But thank you all for being here today. If we haven't met, I'm Hannah Lupi. I work at Martin Waymeyer here in Lansing, a PR agency, and I have the pleasure of serving as both the secretary for the CMPRSA board this year and the PACE chair. I've been on the PACE committee for a handful of years now, and I was co-chair and vice chair with Allie, who will be presenting as well. So I have been lucky to learn from the best, and Allie is still on the committee, and so she will be taking on kind of the second half of this. But Allie, if you want to just introduce yourself now, that's perfect too.
Yeah, hi, my name is Allie Caldwell. I work at Good Marketing. I've been on the PACE committee in some capacity since 2016, chaired it a couple years between, and then still help out with organizing and prepping the awards mostly. So that's anything in Judgify as you're putting together your awards, the judging process, and then also purchasing the trophies. So while you might email Hannah questions about your entries along the way, I can certainly help too.
All right. I saw in the signups and the registrations for this that we have some folks who are new to the PACE Awards or folks who are new to CMPRSA as a whole. So that was really exciting. So before we dive into, what the PACE Awards are, how to fill out good entries, I just wanted to give a quick little spiel about CMPRSA. For those of you who might not be as familiar, CMPRSA was founded in 1977. It's one of the 100 chapters of the Public Relations Society of America, which is the world's largest organization for PR pros. Our chapter focus is specifically advancing the profession of public relations and the professional. So what that looks like in kind of like a day-to-day, month-to-month look for our members is focusing on the individual member and professional development, whether it's through programming opportunities or events, awards, whatever that looks like. Student mentorship. So we work really closely with the PRSSA chapter at MSU here at East Lansing, whether that's having mentor and mentee relationships, working together to help them get PACE awards submitted, or any other pieces of mentorship. We also help professionals get accredited in public relations if that's a journey you're interested in. So getting your APR. And then we also have a focus on diversity and ethical education. Ethics is a huge part of the public relations profession, the choices we make for our organizations, our clients, and diversity and membership are some of our big focuses as a chapter right now as we're thinking about what are the strategic priorities we want to tackle. We are a volunteer-led and run organization. I'd be remiss if I didn't put a little plug in here that if you're interested in getting involved in any capacity, we'd love to help you get involved. There are a handful of board members on the call besides myself. Jenny Anderson's our president, Helen, president-elect. I think I saw Kim on here. She's our treasurer. And we also have a couple volunteers on committees on the call. So it's a really great way, even if you're an experienced PR pro or you're just starting out, to get involved in, one of our committees, whether it's helping with the awards or helping do, our social media or anything like that. We'd love to have you. So don't hesitate to let any of us know if you're interested. I think that's enough about CMPRSA. And do feel free to throw any questions, comments in the chat throughout this. Since I'm sharing my screen, I won't be able to see the chat until I stop sharing my screen, but Allie, Jen, Helen, anyone, Bridget's on the PACE committee as well on the call. They can answer things in the comments, and we can also circle back to Q&A after we're done with things. So to start out, what are the PACE Awards? So the PACE Awards are our chapter, CMPRSA's annual awards ceremony and awards process. So the PACE Awards are open to professional PR practitioners and PR students in the Central Michigan region. So there's a list of counties here that are included in what CMPRSA is. Ingham, Jackson, Clinton, Eaton. So it is not just kind of the Lansing or mid-Michigan bubble. There are quite a few counties who are eligible, and we would love to have entries from. So the entries must be produced by your organization or for your organization. So maybe if you're an agency with clients, you could submit for work that you've done for a client. If you work at an organization or a company, you could submit work that you've worked on, your team's worked on within your company internally or externally, but work that you've worked on in some capacity. The awards are open to members and non-members of CMPRSA. So if you're on the call or you're listening and you're not a member yet, you don't have to be a current member to submit awards. The pricing is a little different. It's slightly higher for non-members or future members of CMPRSA. So that's something to keep in mind, but they are open to everyone. And this can look like anything, even if you don't feel like you sit in a more traditional public relations role. Maybe you're more on the communications marketing or digital advertising side. There's really something for everyone, rather depending on what kind of work you do or where you do your work. There's a really good chance that you're doing either campaigns or tactics through your job that are eligible in some way for the PACE Awards. So whether you're in like corporate comms, you work for a nonprofit, maybe we've got a pretty big state government presence here, or even public relations agencies. Entries must have been completed during the 12 months beginning January 1st, 2023 and ending in December 31st, 2023. So when you're thinking about, it's the 2024 PACE Awards, but you're thinking back on work that you completed throughout the past year. And when we look at the entries themselves, we kind of break these down into two things. So these words should be fairly familiar, just thinking about the day-to-day work you do, but there are campaign entries and tactics entries. There are 25 total categories. We'll have a slide at the end with some resources, but the CMPRSA website is a great resource for your PACE Awards. It's kind of a necessary resource as well, because a lot of the links and information are posted on there. We have a breakdown of the kind of guide for what the different categories look like. But campaigns are things like maybe a public affairs campaign. So maybe you did advocacy work, public service campaign. We have, a shoestring budget campaign. So if you were, working with, I think it's like $5,000 or less, but you pulled together something really great. There's that. We also have a student campaign, which is a free entry. So if you are a student, if you have, any interns at your company, anyone that you might be mentoring right now, that's really exciting. We have a really fantastic MSU PRSA president this year and professional advisor. So I'm excited to see what the students pull in there. And there's a whole list of other things. Tactics are kind of those individual pieces of your campaign, right? So while your campaign entry is going to be broad and comprehensive and covering multiple tactics within that campaign that you ran, the tactics are those little pieces of the puzzle, right? So maybe you had a newsletter, that's a category. Special report publication. So if your company or you put out a really awesome annual report last year, a report on sustainability efforts, anything like that, there's a lot of different categories on the tactics side. And an important flag here is that individual campaign tactics can be entered into multiple categories, but campaigns can only be entered once. So if you did a campaign and you're thinking, is this public affairs? Is this public service? There's descriptions for each of the categories. So make sure you give it a good read and really think about where it best falls into, because you can only do one there. But tactics can be entered in different categories. If you're feeling like, we've got a category for innovative tactics. Maybe you did a social media campaign or social media tactic that you want to submit under social mediums, but you also think you did it in a really cool, different, innovative way. That's kind of an example of where you could have one tactic that kind of crosses into two areas. Entries must be submitted electronically via Judgify. So Judgify is a platform that we've used for the past couple years. It makes our lives easier as a committee. It makes your lives easier submitting things. Angela Minicucci, who's been on the committee for a long time, has reminded me a couple times that people used to mail in or drop off binders for their entries. So if you're having any technical difficulties, always let us know. But I do try and remind myself when maybe something's not working right on Judgify, at least I'm not sending in a binder. Yes, James, there is a website that explains everything. I'll put it up on the screen at the end, but it's just cmprsa.com/pace-awards. And that's going to have any and all information that we as a committee think you're going to need. Thanks, Bridget. Yeah, so just head to that link. It's got a couple things on there. It's got the deadlines. It's got a link to Judgify. It's got on the right-hand side some entry guidelines. So that's just some information about how to submit, what to submit, and Allie's going to walk through a bit of that later on in the presentation. But it's also got some rubrics on there, so you can kind of see what the judges are thinking about, what they're looking for when they're judging your entry, to kind of put you in a good headspace for creating your entry. But I won't steal too much of Allie's thunder on that side. The deadlines for this year, we have two deadlines. The early bird deadline is the first chance to submit. It's March 8th, just before midnight. And then the final deadline is the following Friday, March 15th, also just before midnight. So the only difference between the two deadlines really is the price. So if you can get things pulled together early, really be on top of your game this year, the early bird deadlines have a bit of a cheaper cost for campaigns and tactics, and the final deadline is just slightly higher. So yeah, those are the deadlines for the campaigns and tactics. To talk about judging a bit more. So the competition is judged by members of another nationally recognized PRSA chapter. So what this means is it's not, Allie and I reading your entries and, scoring you and then putting together a award ceremony at the end. It is a kind of randomly, but not quite randomly selected chapter. Usually it's a chapter who's fairly comparable in size, a fairly similar city makeup. I believe this year we're working with Dallas in Texas. So we will hand off our Judgify award information to them, give them a few weeks to judge, and then they'll send things back to us. A couple quick notes on judging. These are not something that is necessarily you need to write down or remember, but just to give you some context for what the judging looks like. Judges are not required to select a winner in any given category if they don't think any entry is deemed appropriate to win an award. So sometimes you might see in the award ceremony, there's only 2 winners for one category or something like that. This is possibly due to judging, or it could be that we just didn't have that many people submit in a specific category. The entries are judged by 2 judges. Entries are scored on a 100-point scale. So that means I look at your award and I say, or your entry, and I say, okay, I go through all the categories, you got a 90. Allie goes through, does the same thing. She gives you 100. So your score is 95. We take the average of those 2 scores. In the event of a tie, a third judge is employed and 3 scores will be averaged then to determine the winner. We'll also implement a third judge in the case that there is a bigger point discrepancy in the two judges. So if I say 100 out of 100, they were flawless, no notes, and Allie says, 70 out of 100 or 75. And so there's quite a gap in those 2 scores. We'll put that third judge in there just to kind of see, did they miss something? Is there kind of what was the discrepancy, and kind of evening it out a bit more then. So what this all looks like at the end after the judging is done is there are 3 award possibilities for campaigns, Pinnacle, Excellence, and oh my gosh, what is the A? Allie, back me up.
Achievement.
Achievement, Pinnacle, Excellence, and Achievement. So it basically works out to first, second, and third places. So we'll have one of those for each of the campaigns that has that many winners or that many entries. And then for tactics, there are just 2 winners. So we'll have that Pinnacle and Excellence for the tactics. So after the judging comes together, we'll have a couple more awards at the ceremony itself. So there are 2. There's the best of show. So that's awarded to the highest scoring campaign entry out of every campaign. So every public service, public affairs, every social media marketing campaign, every campaign entry will be in a spreadsheet. We'll see who had the most points. Did somebody get 100? Did someone get 99? And they'll win the best of show. And then People's Choice is voted on actually at the awards ceremony. So the awards ceremony will be sometime in early May, exact date TBD. But that's when everyone who comes to the award ceremony will get a chance to take a look at a gallery of entries. So that means every person who wins gets to kind of showcase a little bit of their work that they put together. So everyone will get to look at those, vote for People's Choice, and then 1 campaign entry and 1 tactic entry will be awarded the People's Choice Award. Both of those will, again, be awarded during the PACE Awards ceremony held in early May. A couple more PACE Awards beyond the kind of traditional meat and potatoes campaigns and tactics awards. We have a handful of individual PACE Awards that are given out at the ceremony. And these have a little bit of a different submission or nomination process depending on the award. So again, all of this information for the individual awards, the exact processes to either nominate someone or submit an application are all listed out on the website. Again, the CMPRSA/PACE-awards. So I'm just going to give a quick overview of these here, but make sure you look at the website because there are slightly different processes for some of these depending on what it is. So starting with Pacemaker of the Year, this is awarded to a public relations professional who has made a significant contribution to the profession and a sustained contribution. So these are people with their accreditation in public relations. They're doing a lot in the community. They're doing great public relations work in their day-to-day. Maybe they're working with students or serving on boards. Someone who's made a pretty lasting impact to our PR community. Similarly, a new professional award. So kind of in that same vein as the pacemaker, but this is somebody who has 5 years or less of experience specifically in the public relations field. So these are, our younger professionals, entry-level job, people who haven't been around as long, but have really made an impact in that short time that they've been in the profession. We have the Kelly Rossman McKinney Scholarship. This is awarded to a PRSSA junior enrolled in a communication-related program at MSU. So this is a $1,500 scholarship that we're giving to an MSU PRSSA member, a junior, and they're in some kind of communication field. So this is a little bit flexible. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone who's a public relations major, PR minor. It could be, journalism, advertising, marketing, just something in that vein. And that is one where the process is a little bit different. The MSU student will have to pull together a couple letters of reference, send in, a resume, a little bit more information about themselves. So that one is slightly different as well. And then finally, the second student award is Student Practitioner of the Year. So similar to the Pacemaker, the new professional award, we are recognizing an outstanding student practitioner in the field of PR, et cetera, from MSU. So these last 2 awards on here are specifically for students. So we really want to make sure that we're kind of connecting that pipeline of whether it's PRSSA students to, CMPRSA members, or just really giving back to grow the students into professionals in their careers. So these 4 awards have the same deadline as the final deadline for campaigns and tactics. Again, all of this is on the website. So if you don't remember it, don't feel like you need to write it down. It's all there for you. But again, early bird deadline for campaigns and tactics, Friday, March 8th. The final deadline and individual award submission deadline is Friday, March 15th. Let me see what else I've got here. I think that's all I've got on the side of what is PACE, what are we doing. Allie's going to take on, once you're interested in the PACE Awards, or you've realized, okay, I did some awesome work last year, like let's get recognized for it, how you can really put together the best entry possible.
Thanks, Hannah. You can keep your screen up, since I've got a couple notes here that I'd like to keep looking at. Thanks. So what does a typical entry look like? I know some folks here on the call have entered before, but for those who haven't, entries consist of a couple different things. A summary, a summary document. It's 1 page for tactical entries and 2 pages for campaign entries. Typically what this looks like is a Word file, 1-inch margins, and no smaller than 10-point font. So don't just make the font smaller to make it fit within 1 page. We do want to make it readable for our judges. But that does mean that you have a lot of real estate to talk about your entry, and I'll get into a little bit more in a second. Any supporting materials to help guide and add more context for our judges. So if you're entering a social media tactic, for example, providing them screenshots or links to the posts that you're talking about or the ads that you're specifically referencing, that's helpful for them. If you're entering an event, photos from the event are great. Or a press release for your event is also another good example. And then 2 things for not necessarily the judges, but for the PACE Awards committee is a suitable image that represents the work. We use this in our gallery of entries, which displays the work at the event itself, and for our presentation when the award is given out. As well as a synopsis, which is 50 words for tactic entries and 100 words for campaign entries. And this is for our award program that we provide attendees at the PACE Awards. We ask that you enter this information at the beginning just to keep everything all together. And while you're entering and while you're pulling all the information together, I think it's helpful to think about all 4 pieces at the same time. What should I include in my summary? So the single most important piece of an entry is the summary. This provides all the information that a judge would need to assess your entry. Judges evaluate the program or tactic on the merit of 4 criteria: research, planning, execution, and evaluation. All entries, both campaigns and tactics, must address each of those areas. And I'll dive into each one here. So your research category really analyzes or describes the situation in which the program is based. So answering questions like, was it in response to a problem or to examine a potential problem? Did research help redefine the situation in any way? How is research relevant to shaping the planning process? Like, what did you learn to help build your plan? And how did your audience help define your audience? You might be thinking, maybe I didn't do a lot of research up front, but this section because of that, can really stump some folks. And we really, really want you to include it because you are evaluated on this section. So really think hard about, did you do any secondary research? Did you do any research about trends? Was there any consideration to prior information that you just sort of knew to identify your audience? So like if you're an organization that really knows your audiences for a long time, maybe you didn't do specific research to evaluate it for the specific effort, but you already knew that information. How did you get there? that sort of thing. Definitely don't glance over that section because it will, like, you will have points deducted for not including a research section. So you may have to think a little harder about the research if you didn't do a survey or focus groups or anything super quantitative or qualitative at the beginning, but definitely don't skip it. Next is the planning section. These are planning section. So who was involved in the planning? What was your plan? What were your objectives? Who are your audiences? What was the overall strategy? And then a key one here is what was your budget? I'll get into it. Probably I'll reiterate it here in a second, but the budget part's really important because there is a specific question called out for the judges of what was the budget for this overall effort and was it included? If the budget's not included, there's automatically points deducted. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second too. Execution, how were the plans executed and what were the results? Results can go a little bit more in evaluation, but in the execution of the overall things, you might include results like impressions or things like that. How did the activities flow? What were any difficulties you encountered and how were they handled? I think this is a really good one if you feel like you really handled the difficulties really effectively. It can show the judge that, you know, you had some things maybe stacked against you, but you overcame them, which will help provide overall context to the effort as a whole. Were there other organizations involved? So if you're entering this specific entry with on behalf of not just your organization, but others that you partnered with, it might be important to include those folks either upfront or somewhere in the entry to make sure that they're included and recognized. We've certainly had some winners over the course of the years that have been more than just an agency and the organization that they were working with. Maybe there were other partners as well. And you'll definitely want to include if there were any other tactics besides PR utilized, especially for a category like integrated communications, where you really want to emphasize the fact that you use multiple touch points to reach your audiences and reach your goals. And then the last section, what methods of evaluation were used? How were those results related to your research findings? How were the results related to your strategic objectives? And that one's really important. I find that the best entries really state at the beginning what your overall goal was. Was it to drive applications to something? Was it to, you know, reach a lot of people or reach a certain community? More than just results about media hits or impressions or engagements or things of that nature. The entries that really stand out are those that kind of have a very specific stated goal at the beginning and then if the evaluation section addresses whether or not that goal was met. So I talked a little bit about how to stand out in that section, but I really wanted to hit home what makes a winning entry summary. So our chapter has judged entries from other PRSA chapters across the US, and I've judged a lot of great efforts that had terrible entries. So a lot of great work, but the entries unfortunately just didn't meet the mark. So I really wanted to go over what makes an entry work and what helps the judges. So for example, I mentioned about the budget. You definitely want to include everything that's on the rubric. There are copies of the scoring rubric found on the website. They're actually copies of our old rubrics, but they were translated into our online judging platform. So these are the specific questions word for word that the judges will be filling out as they're reviewing the entries. And you want to make sure that every question is answered effectively and every section is included. I think that'll really help set you up for success. And as I mentioned, if it really helps if the goal of your effort is mentioned specifically up front. You can even bold it in the section if you want to. And then in the evaluation section, really utilizing the metrics and the numbers to emphasize whether or not your overall goal was met. Just some general tips and tricks. You won't want to wait till the last minute to start your summary. I highly recommend creating milestones for yourself or making assignments for your colleagues if you need additional support. Nothing is worse than starting your entry like the day before and realizing how much work that you have to do to pull it all together and feeling like feeling like it's a lot of work, and just feeling like you're not going to be able to get the entry done to the best of your ability. So definitely give yourself time to build those entries and pull everything all together. Um, and then secondly, don't assume the judges know anything about your entry. As Hannah mentioned, our judges are completely in a different part of the country. So they're not going to know a lot of things about Michigan. So don't assume that they know even where Lansing is, for example. Don't assume that we're the capital of the state either, because not everybody probably knows that. Um, so it's also especially true if you're submitting the same effort in multiple tactics categories. So you'll want to provide the same background information on every single entry because not every entry is going to get judged by the same person. Oftentimes the judges have, 5 to 6 categories that they're judging, and they're not necessarily judging all the categories that you're submitting in. So providing that same level of background for every entry is really important because it could be a completely different person judging each of your entries. In addition, keep in mind, like I mentioned, the judging chapter is not from Michigan, so they won't be able to know a lot of things that we know about Michigan, and they may not know anything about your industry either. So I know that our capital city has a lot of entries each year that get entered in government, nonprofit, all of that. They might not know industry specific customs or jargon or anything like that. Because of this, I recommend having your summary reviewed by somebody who doesn't know anything about the effort that you put together. This is going to help you make sure that you didn't leave anything out or that there's not anything that's confusing or if there's anything that's missing. You can either ask a colleague that maybe didn't work on the project specifically, maybe a colleague that's not in communications at all, or a friend even that's not in communications might be helpful. Another thing to help you stand out is just making your entry look nice. I've definitely seen a lot of entries over the years that are just Times New Roman font in a Word file, and those are acceptable. But it definitely helps the judge just see how much work you put into it and everything if you just put it on company letterhead and use branded fonts and things like that. So nothing crazy, but just going a little bit the extra mile to make it look nice. And then lastly, being concise. I've definitely seen entries over the years that are too short. So for example, we give you 2 pages to talk through campaigns, but I've seen entries that are like only a page, and it's like you probably could have added more information and context for the judges. But I've also seen entries over the years that divulge into too much into one part of the entry and not enough in another. So being concise and really considering that you only have 1 or 2 pages to share everything there is to know about your entry, and just really getting to the point quickly will be good. And I think that having someone else review it would be helpful and potentially cutting down. So if you end up writing like 2.5 pages and you have to get it down to 2 pages, having someone help you cut things might help. So lastly, we have opened up the judging portal for the year. I don't think the website's updated yet, but if you want to go directly to it, the link is judgify.me/pace 2024. The website, our CMPRSA website, prsa.com/pace awards, will be updated with a link to the Judgify very soon. And as Hannah and I both mentioned throughout, there's a lot of great resources on our website to reference, like the rubric. A lot of the information that both Hannah and I went over today are all there.
Awesome. Thanks, Allie. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I will throw my email in the chat. It's on the website. I am fairly easily findable. All right. So let me take a look at the chat and see what we've got. Feel free to unmute yourself as well and just ask. We can keep it pretty casual. So Jack was wondering, for media relations, are national or state/local placements valued more for PACE? So that's a great question. And I think I would focus on probably less of like what the placement was, like was it the New York Times or was it the Lansing State Journal, but more so like were you reaching your target audience with that, right? So keep that kind of like strategic PR plan in the back pocket, right? So if your goal is to do XYZ and maybe you're hoping, at MSU to reach students and you got a great story in the state news, that's going to be a lot more valuable for your goals, objectives, your campaign, whatever work you're doing, than maybe a national placement. So I would try to keep it in the context of what was strategic and always connecting it back to those goals and objectives, right? And then that also brings up something that I wanted to mention along the lines of kind of none of the people judging are going to be in the Lansing bubble. So if you were doing advocacy work, for example, and you say, we got coverage in MERS or we got coverage in Gongwer, a lot of people aren't going to know that that's, the Capitol government Lansing Bubbles nightly newsletter, right? So adding the context, but also trying to keep everything tying back to the goals and objectives. Did you reach your audience with the placement? I think is more important than, are they going to recognize the placement? And I just dropped my email in the chat. There really are no silly questions for PACE, even if it's not your first time entering and you just can't remember something, or, there's always people who, when we're doing Judgify, will have some minor issues, whether it's just not realizing it, you can pay through PayPal with a credit card and not a PayPal account, just little things like that. Like, that's why we're here. That's why, my email's everywhere, and Allie is the Judgify specialist. So if you have, issues as you're trying to upload things, there's some pretty good instructions along the way on Judgify. So there's some nudges on, like, maybe your file size is too big, or maybe you're trying to submit, the wrong kind of picture attachment. There's lots of little things along the way. So that's why starting early is always great. And like Allie mentioned, have someone look at it from a completely objective perspective. Someone who maybe isn't in your industry. Are you using, acronyms throughout your entry that most people have probably never heard of? So that's always a good check too, is your language understandable, keeping the reading level down, just so it's, you're not making the judge do more work than might be necessary. Let's see. I'm not seeing much else in the chat, but feel free to send us any questions you have after the fact. The website is a great starting place. I will add Judgify there probably today or maybe next week. Let's see. Supporting materials. So in Judgify, you will have 4 file uploads that you can use for supporting materials. The way I traditionally will do that is I will have one for each section, right? So I'll have one for planning, one for research, one for implementation, one for evaluation. And for campaigns, that's usually a pretty hefty PDF from me. So I will, in the research supporting material that I will send in, I'll have, any focus groups we did, any polling, any documents that we received or went through that were super pertinent. In the evaluation section, I've got, any reporting we pulled together, implementation, any memos we wrote, the communications plan. So you can be a bit crafty and kind of pull stuff together within one supporting material. And you can also link out to other things. I can't promise that if you pull together a 30-page supporting material that judge is going to read every page of it. So that's, again, where it's a good balance between like what is necessary and what is overwhelming, I think. So there are 4 file uploads, whatever that looks like for you, for campaigns and tactics.
Yeah, don't overestimate how much time each person's going to spend with the entry, because I would say in my history of reviewing each entry, I'd say I spend probably at least a half an hour, but I definitely don't spend an hour with each entry. That's too much time. And I've had people from other chapters submit entries that are like supporting pages of over 100, and it's like, I'm not going to read every single page of 100 page of documents.
Yeah, the judges are volunteers, so they are volunteering this time to judge our awards, and we are very grateful. But
Yeah.
we don't want be realistic. Um,
If you do have a heavy file that's pretty large, don't be afraid to compress the file either to make it fit the limitation. I generally haven't had any issues over the years with the file size being too large, but if that does happen, like let's say it's a heavy creative file, for example, don't be afraid to compress the file to make it fit the need.
And I think the only other thing I haven't mentioned is a PACE Awards sponsorship plug. So the PACE Awards are entirely supported by donations to the awards program, right? So all of us on the committee, we're a committee of 6 this year, we're donating our time. And then everything from the venue to the food, to the awards themselves, the trophies, that's all possible because of generous local sponsorships. So if you're interested in sponsoring, if your company wherever you work is interested, please connect them with us. We're working on sponsorships right now, so we're happy to create a package that works for your company. Again, all the sponsorship information is on our website, but please don't hesitate to reach out if there's something that you think is missing or something, a different kind of package you would like. We're happy to work with you on that. And as always, we're accepting committee volunteers in any capacity. So if you're really passionate about event planning or anything like that, just let me know. We're always happy to have folks. But with that, I think we'll go ahead and call it a day and update the website with Judgify shortly. But yeah, excited to see what you all send in.